I was born in 1940 at what was then Columbus Hospital in Buffalo, New York. I was born into a family really of people of modest means, although we never knew it. It wasn't until I watched Ozzie and Harriet that I realized that some kids actually had their own bedrooms, and I had an alcove with a curtain. I graduated from grade school in 1954. Now, I had spent the first 3 years at number 3 school on Porter Avenue. My parents thought I needed a little more discipline, and when Holy Cross opened up its parochial school, I was in the first graduating class. There were about 54 of us in one room. I remember teasing that we were the only little Italian-American kids to have Polish accents, but all those nuns were almost universally Polish. It was a great experience. I met lifelong friends, Lee Coppola, who worked tirelessly to make sure that the public knew what was happening with this story, my old classmate. So I was the very first person in my family to go to college. I really remember very vividly a conversation that I was having with my father when I was in the eighth grade, and he was suggesting that I had to pick a trade, that I had to decide whether I wanted to be a plumber, an electrician, and I said, well, I don't think I want to do that. I said, I think I want to go to college. And he looked at me and he said, college? You know, it was like alien. And my mom looked at him and said, Charlie, if he wants to go to college, he's going to go to college. I have one regret from those days. I had an older sister, 6.5 years older than me. Her name was Teresa. Everyone called her Terry. And she was much smarter and much more capable than me in so many ways. And I wish I was the older brother, because I would have insisted that she go to college. It was in college that I first realized that I had a learning disability. I've not discussed it publicly very much, and there are not too many people who know about it, but I had undiagnosed dyslexia, and it was only later in life that I began to realize what it was, and I was so fearful that it was going to hold me back, that it was going to keep me from doing what I wanted to do in life, and I felt a little bit ashamed of it, to be honest with you. Now I'm ashamed of myself for feeling ashamed of that problem. I kept it to myself. It was a sort of a secret, and I developed a really good memory. When you read a book, you just read a book. I look at the table of contents. I read the prologue and the epilogue before I read the book. Always found somebody who was a terrific note taker, so that when I was in class, I didn't even try and take notes for the most part. I listened, and I repeated the words as they were said to me, and the repetition and a decent memory allowed me to compensate for what was my problem. I went to law school, and between the dyslexia and needing to work, and if I ever did anything that I'm most proud of, it's that I worked at a variety of jobs in high school and college, and helped myself because I knew that my parents were not in a position to do some of the things they wanted to do for me. But I also knew that one way or another, if they had to go without, they were going to make sure that my dream came true now that they knew about it and began to share in it. So I worked at the Courier Express, the old Courier Express. I delivered flowers on a flower truck. I drove a beer truck. I worked at the Iroquois Brewery, where we actually had 4 beer breaks a day, as I recall, 7.5 minutes apiece. I think some of the people took the job simply for that. I worked on the garbage truck, slinging garbage most summers. When I was in law school, I did my best. Between working, as I said, with my personal challenges, I missed my average one semester, and the people at UB Law School told me, that was that I would have to be looking for another career or come back in a year and maybe reapply. And I said, no, I think I'll go somewhere else. And they said, well, it's impossible for you to go to another law school because you're not in good standing here. And I realized that life was full of challenges, and you could simply say, I'm going to give in to them, or you could do your best to fight them. And with all my problems, I tested really well, and people thought I was fairly smart and had some gifts. And I wound up going to the University of North Dakota. Now, there weren't too many people who were Italian, Catholic, and from the East, but I made some great friends, and most importantly, I found the love of my life in North Dakota. I met my Mary D. We met in 1966. A few months later, we were married in 1967, May of 1967. We graduated, and we've got a U-Haul trailer, lugged everything we could, and something that attached to my 1963 Impala convertible. Mary D. was a school teacher in those days. She taught English until she realized that it was very hard to get high school students interested in Shakespeare. And she said, I think I want to do something else. I said, what? She said, I don't know. I said, well, why don't you consider going to law school? And she did. She became a lawyer. And we like to kid it's become sort of the family business. Our daughter, Amy, is a Supreme Court justice, was a terrific lawyer, was with a Wall Street firm, and then came back to Buffalo and practiced with Connors and Villardo firm, and I'm hoping that she'll consider going to the appellate division someday. I grew up on 7th Street between Pennsylvania and Jersey. We grew up across the street from the Merkin's chocolate factory. And I remember laughingly thinking years later about the wonderful smell of chocolate, which I thought was universal. I mean, because that's the way I grew up, and that wafting smell of chocolate was wonderful to me. And during wine pressing season, all the people, all the grandfathers, my grandparents and everybody else in my circle, their grandparents all made wine at home. And it was sort of a big party. My grandmother would make platters of cold cuts and olives and cheese. Somebody would be playing a concertina. I loved those days so much, and I loved the smell of the wine fermenting, mixing with that chocolate smell that I mentioned to you earlier that was so unique. My wife says I'm a pack rat. I save a lot of things, including a wine press and a couple of old barrels that belonged to my grandparents. And I've taken them to Washington, D.C. and to New York and wherever I've gone and lived for any amount of time, but I will not get rid of them. Those are my roots, and I'm very proud of them. I grew up in a neighborhood that was dominated by Italian Americans, some people who identified themselves as Sicilian Americans. But if you were an Italian or from one of the provinces of Italy, you were unique in that neighborhood. When I got a little bit older, when I got into high school, I realized that there was a significant amount of prejudice against Italian, prejudice that was subtle for the most part. And it made me very much aware of how that could influence your development as a person, how it could interfere with your dreams, how it could put itself in the way of your success. I think it helped me to become more tolerant and more understanding. When I hear people today speaking about, these immigrants, we should keep them out, well, unless you're a Native American, your people wouldn't be here if we didn't find the United States of America accepting of foreigners. I believe in ideas, and I believe that ideas are born from a spirit of freedom, a spirit of creativity. When I grew up, I guess I always said I was going to be one of two things in this world. I was either going to be a very successful public relations person, or I was going to enter politics and government. And I think government service appealed to me because it was a way to do good for more than just myself. I like the opportunity to help people. I'm proudest of the number of young lawyers who consider me a mentor and who I helped with their education, who I hired. I have a wonderful gift for understanding talent in people and mixing people from different backgrounds. I was never afraid to understand my own limitations and to surround myself with very good people, because I always believed that out of that clash of ideas will come truth and success. And I believe that to this day. When I was the United States Attorney, the hiring that I did was second to none. And I'm very, very proud of that. I did that when I was Assistant Secretary at the Labor Department, and I did that also when I was Assistant Secretary at Treasury.